Boldwood presents Life Begins at 50, written by Celia Anderson and read by Jill Mills. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. To change one's life. 1. Start immediately. 2. Do it flamboyantly. 3. No exceptions. End quote. William James. Prologue, 20th of March, 1998. The disco ball is spinning, and fractured shards of light are already turning the floor into a kaleidoscope. Kate hears the opening chords of the song that's been chosen for the first dance, and her heart sinks. Howard's still propping up the bar, schmoozing a gaggle of middle-aged men with pot bellies. They remind Kate of a semicircle of expectant mums, or maybe moomins, sticking out their little round tummies so proudly. As she watches, they all haw at the end of a very long anecdote. Howard joins in, louder than any of them. Kate knows he hopes they might be able to swing it for him to join the prestigious Meadowthorpe Golf Club. Whoopee! Off you go, love, her dad says, giving Kate a little push towards the dance floor. Leave this to me. I'll round him up for you. Good luck with that one, Kate mutters, but she does as she's told. Ted Baxter squares his shoulders, loosens his tie, and marches towards the bar. Soon, the rather unsteady figure of Kate's brand-new husband is weaving its way towards her. Howard looks good in his hired tailcoat and waistcoat. He's ditched the top hat, but he hasn't yet developed a rounded profile, so the waistcoat and trousers perfectly complement his slim figure. "Go for it, my son," one of the golfers cries. "Give her one for me." Ted shoots the man a very dirty look and makes a move back towards the group at the bar, but Kate shakes her head at him. This isn't the time to demonstrate how protective he's always been of his only daughter. It's not the Christmas episode of EastEnders, and her father is the local doctor. She doesn't want to fight. It wouldn't do Ted's image any good. Not wanting to look less than the perfect bride, Kate pulls her stomach in and tries to stand tall. Moving into the flat above the Chinese takeaway with Howard has made her pre-wedding diet almost impossible, but she's managed to squeeze her naturally curvaceous 14 to 16 body into a pale green sheath of a dress. The heavily boned basque has helped. Her mother wanted her to do the whole meringue thing with a big skirt and veil, but the idea of trying to look like a virgin bride after 6 months of living in what her granny insists on calling sin has put Kate off that idea. Minty frost is the shade of the frock, according to the pencil-thin shop assistant, who worked hard to persuade Kate that it was only a tiny bit too tight and she'd soon drop a few pounds. "All brides-to-be lose weight before the big day," she'd said, with the confidence of someone who was clearly never polished off an entire Chinese dinner for two and still had room for the prawn crackers. Howard reaches Kate and holds out his arms in an extravagant gesture that nearly topples him. She moves closer and lets him enfold her. At least that way he'll stand a chance of staying upright. They begin to sway to the music, and the guests let out a collective "ah" as the words of the song become clear. "Love Me for a Reason" wasn't Kate's choice, but Howard's mum loves Boyzone, and neither Kate nor Howard had any idea what they should pick. A reason for love. That's an interesting thought. Why has Kate decided to marry Howard? They were fine just living together. It was the messy student type of lifestyle she'd never had before, living away from home for the first time and only washing up when you ran out of crockery. No commitments. No rules. Providing a regular retreat for Kate's wayward brother Jamie into the bargain, for which her parents are more than grateful. Jamie's wild streak is a lot more manageable now Howard has introduced him to the delights of golf. Ted and Caroline are full of praise for the way Howard has transformed a 20-year-old fire-raiser into something resembling a grown-up. They are 100% in favour of this wedding. Howard will be an asset to the Baxter clan, in their opinion. If only Kate felt as convinced.
"How you doing, Mrs. Brown?"
Howard murmurs.
"It's a great party. Jamie's had a few too many, but most people are holding their booze so far. Clive says it was a good move booking the golf club function room for the do. I think I'll be in there before Christmas. Full membership for me and provisional for your little brother, if we can keep him on the rails."
"Lovely," says Kate, unable to focus on anything but the moment when they go upstairs and she takes off this bloody basque. She murmurs the thought to Howard as the music swells, and he sniggers.
"I can't wait either," he says. "I'm going to give you a night to remember, babe."
Kate doubts this. He's already ticked her off for getting fake tan on his brilliant white shirt when they kiss for the photographer, so she'll need to have a long, hot shower before she gets into bed to get rid of any hint of tango. By the smell of the alcoholic haze that's surrounding her now, Kate guesses that as soon as Howard's stripped off his own wedding finery, he'll be face down and snoring on the rose-petalled four-poster before she's even left the bathroom. She closes her eyes and blocks out the uncomfortable image. This night is only laying the groundwork for the next stages, and there'll be plenty of time for the real reason she's marrying Howard after she's done her teacher training and had a few years getting established. They shuffle to the music for a moment or two. Then Howard bends to whisper in Kate's ear. His breath is hot and beery on her neck.
"Well, while I think about it, I was talking to the guys about us buying a house," he says, glancing over at the bar. "I mentioned you were interested in working in a school. Quentin's missus is the head teacher at the primary nearest to us. He reckons they're looking for teaching assistants. He can get you an intro."
Kate's eyes are wide open now. She looks up at her husband. He's beaming, as if he's just given her the best news ever. "You're joking, aren't you? I don't need a teaching assistant job," she says. "I'm going to train to be a proper teacher. We agreed."
"I know we did, but that'd take ages,"
Howard says, in the syrupy voice he always uses when he wants something badly.
"You've already wasted enough time playing at catering with your Aussie mate."
"I haven't been wasting time with Sophie. We got our catering qualifications. I just didn't know then how much I wanted to teach."
Yeah. But if you got a teaching assistant post, we could have a mortgage a lot sooner."
"A mortgage on what? I don't want to live in a new house on a half-built estate in the middle of nowhere. I like our flat."
"Oh, come on. That place was just to get us going, no more and no less. Clive says his mum's just gone into a retirement home and she's selling up. She's got one of those little cottages on Fiddler's Row. That'd be more your style, wouldn't it? Cosy and old-fashioned."
Kate guesses he means this to be a compliment, so she ignores the image it conjures up and focuses on this new thought. A house in that lovely terrace on the village green. That would definitely beat the flat. "We couldn't afford it, though, could we?" she says. Already, the idea of living in such a dream of a place is winkling its way into her mind. Willowbrook Village has always been her home, nestling in a generous loop of the Nene, with water meadows stretching out into the distance and the wild sea marshes only a few miles away. Her parents live in one of the gracious riverside houses near the country park, bought as a near wreck when property was much cheaper, but Kate has always known that she and Howard would need to look for something much smaller when the time came to move.
"We might be able to manage it if you were working," her new husband says. "With 2 steady incomes, we'd be laughing. Also, I had a quiet word with your dad yesterday when we were doing the wedding rehearsal."
"Oh, Howard, you haven't asked him for money, have you? Please tell me you haven't." Kate can feel her face burning. Both her parents seem to think the sun shines out of Howard's neat little backside. They won't be so keen on Jamie's chief cheerleader if he's going to start tapping them for cash.
"Nor a handout. It'd just be a loan. Ted would love to have you living close by where he can make sure I'm looking after you properly."
Kate thinks about Fiddler's Row. The longing to live there almost takes her breath away. There are 11 houses in the terrace row that curves around two sides of the green with its 3 ancient willow trees. It's a beautiful spot, often photographed by visitors to Willowbrook. The lively little brook that gives the village its name wiggles right across the centre of the green as it makes its way down to the river. Fiddler's Row is directly opposite Kate's favourite pub, and there's even a handy shop at the end of it. The river is only 5 minutes' walk away, and Willowbrook Country Park, with its lakes and woods, is barely a mile from the cottages. But what about my degree? I want to be a teacher, Howard, you know that, she says, pushing the vision of her perfect home away. He kisses the top of her head and gives her a squeeze. Be realistic for once, eh? It's time to knuckle down and earn some proper cash. You're 24 now, Mousie. Hey! I can officially call you Mousie Brown now. How cool is that? Howard laughs at his own feeble joke. Kate can smell whiskey along with the beer now, and a trace of his spicy aftershave. The combination isn't alluring. She opens her mouth to argue, furious enough not to protest at the hated nickname. You can't say I've got to change my plans now, after all the times we've talked about it. You just can't. I've done all my research and the forms are ready to send off. It's agreed. I'm going to uni in September. But think about it, Mousie. You can't live in halls like a normal student when you're a married woman. You've got me to think about. Plus, you'd feel like an OAP next to all those kids fresh from sixth form. There'd be other students my age. I know there would. 24 isn't old, Howard, and the university campus isn't that far away. It's on a direct bus route too. I can commute. They wobble to the music for a few more minutes. Kate thinks she might have won, but then Howard plays his trump card. If you went to work properly now, instead of just marking time in the bakery doing silly shifts and spending ages on teacher training, not only would we be able to buy that little cottage in one of the best locations in the village, but we could start a family even sooner. Babies, Katie. That's what you want, isn't it? And there it is, right in front of her. Love me for a reason. This is Kate's reason. Because the image of herself teaching a class of eager-faced 5-year-olds is inspiring, but it isn't quite as tempting as the one of her cradling a lovely, cuddly baby in her arms, with a curly-haired toddler holding onto her legs and an older child, maybe even twins, playing with their Lego on the hearthrug. Her mum and dad are backing Howard as husband material, largely because he's dragged Jamie back from the brink of being a full-time hooligan. But Kate knows, in her heart, she's chosen him because he's strong, fit, and she thinks he'd make a great father for her future children. That's not a bad list, is it? Not everyone marries with a heart full of unconditional love and stars in their eyes. This is real life, not a fairy tale. A few braver or possibly tipsier couples have joined Kate and Howard for the slow dance, but, as it ends, the DJ switches to the disco playlist that Kate had prepared when she was trying to distract herself from going downstairs to the takeaway for 3 spring rolls and a bag of chips. The sound of the first dance track brings more people to the floor, and soon there's a mass of waving arms and gyrating bodies as Hi-Ho Silver Lining gets the party started. Howard gives Kate a pat on the arm and mutters something about going to have another word with Clive and Quentin. He heads for the bar, ploughing his way through the crowd as family and friends slap him on the back and tell him what a lucky man he is. Kate kicks off her hideously tight heels and throws them under a nearby table. A serious conversation with Howard about their future is looming, but for now there's dancing to be done. Sophie bursts onto the dance floor, sparkling in a very short, very sequined dress. She grabs Kate by both hands and twirls her around to the music. Kate laughs out loud. Are you okay, doll? Sophie yells above the din. You two looked as if you were having the sort of a chat a loved-up couple shouldn't be having at their wedding do. I was watching you and wishing I could magic us to the motherland. You need to get your old carefree look back again. You know I've always wanted to tag along and go to Australia with you when you visit your folks, says Kate wistfully. I guess it'll never happen now. Never say never. That's always been my motto. Look, I'm going to ask you the same question again.
Are you okay? I saw a film once where the bride legged it from her own wedding do. But that's mad. Weddings take ages to arrange and they're really expensive. Why would anyone do that? Sophie seems to be struggling for words, which isn't like her. Well, sometimes people change their minds, I guess. They get caught up in the buzz of the moment and then realise, anyway, I just wanted to make sure I'm fine, says Kate, as Sophie's words dry up. And suddenly, she really is. There's a reason for all this. Everything else can look after itself. What happens next doesn't seem to matter anymore. So long as there are babies in her future, everything else will be just perfect. Sophie frowns but says no more, and they dance until their feet ache. Howard's right in one respect. It really is a great party. Kate's prediction about his bedroom activities turns out to be almost accurate, except that he adds an extra element by throwing up in the sink before crashing out. But Kate doesn't worry too much. There'll be plenty of time for that kind of stuff when she's good and ready, and if they really can swing it, buying a house on Fiddler's Row will be a big step in the right direction. Perhaps her dream career was just that, a fantasy, along the same lines as the idea of travelling to Sydney with Sophie and backpacking around Oz. It's time to be a sensible married woman now. It's almost time to become a mum. Chapter 1. January, 25 years later. So come on then, what's stopping you? I've got the bleach in my bag. You've only got to say the word. Kate heard Sophie speaking through a kind of fog. She'd been miles away, lost in a prickly flashback of her wedding night, brought on by an excess of January melancholy. This March would have marked 25 whole years of being married, if Howard had still been around. Ever since they'd made their vows, Kate had found 20th of March more significant than any other day of the year. It stood for hopes and dreams and future plans. To begin with, she'd taken the time to produce an imaginative, handcrafted card for Howard and source the traditional present for each anniversary, but gradually the effort dwindled to a shop-bought card and perhaps a voucher of some sort, if he was lucky. Howard had never seemed to mind whether Kate remembered or not, and his own offerings, usually of rather tatty flowers, were spasmodic, so in the end, Kate had decided not to mark the occasion. Even so, many of these anniversaries still managed to make themselves significant for one reason or another. Maybe if the marriage had lasted, they would have had a party for their silver wedding. On the other hand, there was no reason why Howard would have had the urge to plan a celebration of all those years with Kate when he'd been sleeping with someone else for at least the last 12 months, even if sleeping had probably been the last thing on his mind. Although the new lady would have inherited the snoring part too, which was an excellent thought. Kate hoped Howard still sounded like an ageing warthog when he slept. "What are you talking about, Soph?" Kate asked, dragging her mind back to the present. She rubbed her eyes and blinked at their reflection in the long mirror on the wall. Sophie was looking distinctly irritable. She must have been waiting a while for an answer. "I had a feeling you weren't listening. Going blonde. You said you'd think about it last time I came to cut your hair. Come on, there'll never be a better opportunity. Your mum did it months ago, just before she left for France. Good for you, Caroline. That was what I said at the time. Blondes definitely have more fun, I reckon." She laughed and ruffed her own short curls. "I'm a prime example of that, aren't I?" The image of Caroline Baxter living a carefree life in rural Normandy wasn't welcome. Her mother had made the move to live near Jamie and his family way too soon after her husband died, in Kate's opinion. They'd hardly had time to organise a decent memorial service for Kate's dad before Caroline had the house on the market and was ferrying numerous carloads of boxes and bin bags to the charity shops. It had been clear that the sudden departure of Ted Baxter the previous year had affected Kate and her mother very differently. Caroline's honey-coloured hair sometimes seemed like just another way of thumbing her nose to the past. There was no way Kate was going to go down the same road. It was quite enough to cover her greys with a box of medium brown dye every few weeks. "Ah well, I'll ask you again next time, said Sophie. I just thought, what with Howard doing a bunk like that, the slimy toad, well, to be honest, I hoped she'd be ready to make a fresh start. He never did deserve you. Shagging someone else all this time and then leaving you high and dry after you'd put up with him for years. What a dork. Kate winced at the word shagging. Sophie had always been blunt, and the picture this conjured up made her stomach turn. She wondered if Howard still left his socks on. Her friend was on a roll now and didn't notice Kate's expression. And what did he ever contribute in return, the useless drongo? Sophie continued. All he did was go to work and play golf. He was a waste of space. Auntie Beryl always said so too. Sophie's clever hands were busy with the scissors and comb, but she gestured with her head to the party wall that joined Kate's cottage to Beryl's mirror version of the same. Kate could hear the TV turn to top volume as the pointless theme tune thundered out. Batty Beryl next door, as Howard had called the old lady, was slightly deaf now at 80 years old, but in no way batty. In fact, she was probably one of the shrewdest people in the village. Kate wondered how many other locals considered her to have been Howard's doormat. Quite a lot, she imagined, including the two stalwarts who completed Beryl's gang, Anthea and Winnie. They were regulars at the Fox and Fiddle across the green, and also at any other village activities that involved bingo, raffles, cake and/or Prosecco. All three were now either widowed or divorced, and Beryl and her friends had developed a reputation for living life to the full. Kate reflected sadly that those ladies would be quite right to think she'd been downtrodden for years. She let Howard walk all over her for way too long. My Arnie is one cool cookie, Sophie said. She had a great time when she went to see Mum and Dad last year. She even talked about emigrating to join them. Did you know that? It was only the idea of having Christmas dinner on the beach that put her off. She said turkey and sprouts wouldn't taste the same in the heat. Oh, and she couldn't persuade the others to come with her. She does love her old mates. Beryl was going to move to Australia. She never told me. Well, she didn't leave us in the end, did she? But she's visited loads of times since Mum met my dad back in the day and headed off out there. She's a right globetrotter. So where have you been recently, Katie? Got any trips planned, have you? There was no need to answer this. Sophie finished her work and held a hand mirror up at the back for Kate to see the result. It was hard to spot any difference in the before and after viewings. The little pile of hair on the floor was never enough to suggest a major change had occurred. Lovely, said Kate automatically. It wasn't, but it was neat and tidy, and still long enough for her to tie back when she was at work in the cafe. Her hair had reached down to her waist when Kate had first met Sophie. Now it was just a hindrance if she let it get too long. As if reading her mind, Sophie said, Still happy behind the counter at Pat's place. Don't you miss being at the school? The lump in Kate's throat was making it difficult to answer. She swallowed, hard. I do miss the kids, she said. It was so hard going back to work after Dad died, though. I lost the plot for a while. The best thing all round seemed to be to have a completely fresh start. Kate paused, collecting her thoughts. It had been a hideous time, and thinking about it still made her want to howl with pain. I had plans to get my act together and do some of the things I'd been putting off for ages, but then everything changed again. She continued, When Howard left, I got kind of stuck. Sophie was silent for a few minutes, packing up her kit. The grandfather clock in the corner creaked, warning that it was about to strike the half hour. At least Howard hadn't tried to take the clock. It was the only thing Kate had managed to rescue from her parents' house when her mum had cleared the decks and sold up so speedily. I suppose if he'd had kids it would have been different, Sophie said. You'd have had more of a focus. The silence that followed this bold statement carried on until the clock finally struck. Kate turned to look at Sophie, who was avoiding her gaze. But we didn't, did we? Have babies, I mean. No. The single word showed that Sophie realised she'd gone too far. This was a place where they never strayed. The longed-for babies were just another dream now. Kate sighed and stood up, brushing the last remaining clippings of hair from her jeans. Do you ever regret not having children?
she asked, batting the ball firmly back into Sophie's court. There was no hesitation. Never. There's Paul to think about, and neither of us ever got broody, luckily. We've got Ralph, too. He's worse than any baby. He's probably winding Auntie Beryl around his little finger. I mean, poor, right now. She loves dog-sitting when I'm working over in this neck of the woods. Kate considered this. Since Sophie and Paul had adopted their beloved pet, they had mellowed even more, if that was possible. Deciding to give a rather dishevelled rescue dog a home had been a bonus for them. Ralph, once he was properly settled and had stopped eating their shoes and barking at the neighbours for entertainment, had been a definite asset. Sophie was clearly still mulling the subject over. We like our life just how it is, Kate. I'm so glad I've still got my grand's old cottage here. I wasn't sure what to do with the place when she left it to me, but it saved me loads of money in rent. Paul's got the little flat in London for when he's working, and we give each other lots of time to do our own thing. But when we get together, we like to party. We go to the theatre, we see our friends, have fancy holidays. Sophie put her head on one side, distracted. Maybe you should think about getting a dog. I'd love to, but I can't right now. Kate says, you know I'm out at work a lot. It wouldn't be fair. I guess that's true, but it's different for us. Ralph fits in well with our lives, and it's lovely to come home to such a warm welcome every time we go out. If we go abroad, he stays with our lovely neighbours, or Aunt Beryl, and everyone's happy. Kids use up lots of money and time and, well, headspace. You can't do fun stuff whenever you want to if you've got a house full of the little buggers. No, but... Kate stalled. She couldn't begin to explain the gnawing grief she still felt at not becoming a mother. The sadness and secrets in her past were always waiting in the wings for her to drop her guard. One secret in particular haunted her more than most. She pushed it out of her mind. Only Howard knew the truth, and he wouldn't tell. He wouldn't dare. Chapter 2. Sophie hadn't noticed the fact that Kate was now staring into space, lost in her memories. Anyway, we didn't go down that road, the having sprogs thing, so there's no point in discussing it, is there? She said, getting her phone out and flipping through her diary. Let's get the next appointment in the calendar before I go. It's a good job I make the effort to come here and tidy you up, because you'd never bother to find a new hairdresser if I didn't. You'd look like a Yeti or Rip Van Winkle by now. Cheers. It's true. If you didn't have the job in the cafe, you'd probably never be out of your pyjamas. I'm okay. Nobody needs to worry about me. I'm a bit lonely, but that's par for the course after the last year. I'm still getting my head round losing Dad and then Howard going. Yes, I know, but you should be getting out more now. You're popular. You always have been. I bet they missed you loads at the school, and it wasn't just the children who loved you. The mums and dads at the school felt the same, you could tell. How many godchildren have you got now? I've lost track. Kate smiled. Oh, there are loads of them. Plus Elsie, of course. She's the one I see most often. Elsie's Sam's daughter, isn't she? He did well to get custody of her when his girlfriend left him high and dry. He was only a kid himself at the time, to be fair. He was 17. It was 6 years ago, but it sometimes seems like only yesterday. He still looks like a teenager. Can't remember if I told you, but Sam works in the cafe with me now, so it's easier for me to help out with Elsie. Kate looked across at the wall by the kitchen door. From top to bottom, it was covered in drawings and photos pinned to a giant corkboard. That's my gallery, she said. Most of the pictures are by Elsie, but the others send me some now and again. I've got photos of them all up there too. Sophie reached out to give Kate a hug. You're an angel, that's what you are. Still holding Kate by the shoulders, Sophie stood back to look at her. If only you'd just agree to smarten yourself up a bit, you'd be absolutely perfect. Huh. I thought best friends were meant to like you how you are. And anyway, these are my favourite jeans. Sophie tutted. I'm your best mate, whatever you're wearing, obviously, but those jeans are the darkest blue you can buy, and I bet they've got a label on that says Comfort Fit. Yes, I thought so. And you've dug out that ancient blue T-shirt and the navy cardi again. You had those on last time I was here, I'm sure you did. It's not navy, it's indigo. Kate could hear the defensive tone in her voice. We can't all have your flair for clothes. Today, Sophie was modelling her usual stylish collection, including sunflower-patterned leggings, a bright green sweatshirt, and a diamante headband holding back her short white blonde hair. Her multiple piercings glinted every time she moved her head, giving her an extra sparkle. Even her voice was exotic compared to Kate's, with its mellow Australian undertones that were only slightly diminished by her years in England. Kate looked down at herself. I'm comfy. These are my at-home clothes. Yes, and they're almost the same as the going-out ones, aren't they? If you ever did go out, that is. You used to love being colourful. I still remember that rainbow bikini and the matching sarong you had when we first met. Every time we went to the beach, you turned heads. Let's face it, everything in your wardrobe is either black, grey or navy now. Indigo. But Kate could tell Sophie wasn't listening. She was glancing round the room and frowning. It's very beige in here, isn't it? The only splash of colour in this room used to be that lovely jade green sofa. Where's it gone? Ah, don't tell me, she said. He took it. It was on HP. Hire purchase, or actually, Howard purchase, Kate added, seeing Sophie's puzzled expression. He's still paying for it. He chose it after all. And where's the great big flashy TV? Surely he didn't leave you without a telly. Kate automatically glanced over to where Howard's pride and joy had sat, completely dominating the little room. Again, it was his. Bang & Olufsen, top of the range. I didn't want it. Sophie's face showed her horror. But what do you do in the evenings? The selfish git, how could he? You love watching TV. I usually go to bed quite early these days and watch something on my iPad. I get lonely down here on my own in the evenings. The dismal words seemed to lie between them, making Kate feel even more pathetic than she did before. She knew Sophie would never stand for such behaviour from her partner, but a friend had always been so sure of herself. Paul and Sophie had met on the Gold Coast during one of her extended jaunts and Paul's only long-haul adventure. They'd been married for the past decade, after both had spent many years previously being contentedly single. They were even happier now than when their whirlwind romance took off. How did they do it? Kate wished, not for the first time, that she had some of Sophie's bottle. It was no fun being the eternal wimp in a relationship, and now it was way too late to do anything about it. What's your secret, Soph? She asked. How come you and Paul are so blissed out all the time? Sophie laughed. You're joking, aren't you? We have our rows like everyone else. Anyone who says they never argue with their partner's either a liar or so wimpish they can't bring themselves to talk back. But you're happy? Yep, I guess so. Don't want to tempt fate. You know, like in those Hello magazine interviews when the celebs go on and on about how much in love they are, and the next thing is you're reading about their divorce in the papers. Kate pondered on this for a moment. I think there must be some deep secret, though. Something I don't know about. To a good marriage, you mean? Or any kind of long-term relationship? Either? Both? Seriously? I've got absolutely no idea. She laughed. Perhaps ours works because we spend so much time apart. Right, enough of this heavy stuff. Let's think about colours, said Sophie briskly. Do you really like indigo best these days? Or is it just easier to blend in? No, I still like lots of different shades. And before you say any more, this has definitely been an indigo kind of day. But I have got other things I can wear. I'm sure you have, but when are they going to see the light of day? I can come and help you if you like. I'm really good at makeovers. Kate flinched. No, it's okay. I can do it myself. I promise I'll have a go at sorting out my wardrobe just as soon as I've got time. Sophie picked up her hairdressing bag in one hand and gave Kate a hug with her free arm. Okay, I believe you. I think. Look, I'm going to have to dash. I told Auntie Beryl I'd cook tonight. She wants her favourite. Chips, pork sausages with onion gravy and mushy peas, said Sophie, shuddering. You've got to hand it to her. That woman's got the digestive system of a 20-year-old. We can talk on the phone any time about all this, though. You need taking in hand, girl. And Katie? Yes? It's all very well making sure all your godchildren are okay, but don't forget about yourself, will you? You'll be 50 soon. Sophie looked down at her fingers as she counted, then said, September's only 8 months away. It's probably time you took stock.
I really don't want reminding about the big birthday. I know you don't, but think about what I've said, won't you? There's no need to go blonde just yet, but something's got to happen. You're stagnating. Cheers. What a lovely thought. Kate pulled a hideous face, but Sophie didn't smile. I mean it. Next time I'm here, I want to see that you've made some changes in your life, okay? And I'm giving you a deadline. How do you mean? This sounded serious. Kate's stomach fluttered alarmingly. This has got to be your year, right? By Christmas, you're going to show me that you've left the past behind and started all over again. Yeah, well, that's not as easy as it sounds. Kate saw the look on Sophie's face. Okay, I'll try. I really will. I just wish we could meet up more often, Soph. You're always either working or off up to London to see Paul. Her friend regarded Kate, head on one side. My house isn't that far away, you know. It's 20 minutes' walk at the most, hardly even out of the village. You could visit me sometimes, instead of us leaving it 6 weeks or more every time. Why not come and stay the night? A sleepover, like the kids say. She waited for a response, and when none came, she sighed heavily. But you won't, will you? You never venture anywhere further than Willowbrook Park Cafe these days. How long is it since you had a holiday? Well, exactly. So, shall we start to think about you for a change, doll? Kate couldn't think of a reply. Sophie checked her watch. Jeez, look at the time. I'm off. Those sausages won't cook themselves. Think about it, though. The spare bed's always made up. Just give me a few hours' notice to get the gin and tonic in and hoover around, and you can come over any time. I'll even lend you my second-best dressing gown. See ya. With a final wave, Sophie left, stepping over the low wall that divided the tiny front garden from Beryl's. Kate watched her friend let herself in next door and then turned to look at the view that always soothed her soul, however ruffled she was feeling. The village green stretched out ahead, with its trailing willow trees, and the brook that hopped and skipped over mossy rocks, giving local children the perfect place to play poo sticks from the narrow wooden bridge that crossed it. The path that wound its way round in front of the houses led to the Fox and Fiddle, where Kate had spent many sociable hours in the past, but hardly visited any more. A few early punters were already gathering for happy hour, and their voices rang out across the grass, making Kate think of chilled white wine and raucous pub quizzes. Sophie's visit was always a breath of fresh air, but this time it had brought with it a turmoil of mixed feelings. Frustration at being put so firmly on the spot mingled with the very first stirrings of hope. It had been a difficult few months, but for some reason this chilly January Saturday felt like a new beginning. Kate couldn't quite face the thought of going over to the pub, let alone sleeping in a strange bed at Sophie's house, but change was in the air. Her indigo day must be the last one, at least for a while. From now on, it would be brighter colours and a lighter heart. All she needed to do was to figure out how to begin. Chapter 3. Kate peered at her watch, hoping it would tell her that it was nearly bedtime. This had been happening far too often lately, and she was ashamed of herself for wanting time to fly. But the days had sometimes dragged since Howard left. Although she hadn't particularly wanted him to return from work, it was a focal point. Dinner had to be thought about, which sometimes meant a quick dash to the shop on the corner, if Kate hadn't planned ahead. This was always a good chance for a chat with Mrs. Nightingale, who ruled the roost at Willowbrook General Stores, a grand name for the small shop at the end of Fiddler's Row. Mrs. N, nobody except Beryl and her acolytes ever dared to call her Sylvia, was ferocious and prickly in equal measures, but she'd known Kate for years, and it was comforting to speak to someone who knew the Baxter family history inside out. Also, Mrs. N had her finger firmly on the pulse when it came to village life and politics, which was helpful now Kate wasn't in the thick of the action at the primary school. Each visit to the shop was like a local news bulletin, complete with sniffs and folded arms if the details were salubrious. Grabbing her duffel coat from the hook on the back of the door, Kate thrust her purse into her pocket and headed down the path to the shop.
She was in dire need of either wine or chocolate tonight. Probably chocolate would be less likely to leave her with a feeling of self-loathing at 3 a.m. "Well, look at you with your fancy haircut," said Mrs. Nightingale as Kate approached the counter. "I didn't think it looked any different, to be honest," said Kate, glancing at herself in the mirrored wall tiles behind the till. "I'm surprised you noticed." "You don't get much past me, dear. I saw Beryl Sophie go by earlier. She did me a perm last time, and it's still in good shape, so I didn't need her this month." Mrs. Nightingale patted her tight grey curls proudly. Her hair was so stiff with hairspray that Kate knew it wouldn't dare to move, even if gale-force winds hit the village. The old lady pursed her lips. "What are you after for tonight, then? Bottle of Chardonnay, is it?" "No wine, thanks. I'm just going to get some dark chocolate," Kate said, choosing 2 bars of her favourite brand. "There's a good film on later." "Life on the edge, eh?" said Mrs. N, smirking. "You want to be getting out more, dear. There are still some nice young men available. Well, when I say young." She peered over her glasses at Kate. "You don't want to push your luck. Isn't it the big 50 this September? I always remember, 'cause you're the same age as my Christopher and a couple of years older than our Lenny, isn't that right? All good chums together, growing up." Kate decided not to put Mrs. N right about these supposed close friendships. Christopher wasn't too bad, but Lenny had always been a thorn in her side. She also ignored the reference to the birthday and cut to the chase. "I don't need a man." "Of course you don't. Me neither, when I come to think of it. We're strong women, you and me. The kids keep telling me I should retire, but I've got staff and family to help out. I can pick and choose when I work these days." "Lucky you." "I know. Well, enjoy your film. I'm going to shut up shop, soak my feet in a bowl of hot, soapy water, and have a plate of fried onions later. You won't find a man who'd put up with that, I can tell you." "No, you're probably right." Kate paid for her purchases, trying not to visualise the scene. She said goodbye and left the shop quickly, speeding up as she got closer to home. Suddenly her little house felt very much like a refuge. She was glad she'd left a light on. It looked welcoming through the window and almost cosy, despite the lack of furniture. Kate's cottage, number 6 Fiddler's Row, was right in the middle of the terrace, and she loved the symmetry of the curve of 11 cottages, each one with a small front garden, uneven roof tiles, green with moss in some places, and a variety of colours on the front doors. Some of these doors were smarter than others, with fresh paint and shiny brass numbers. Others hadn't stood the test of time so well, or had been left to the mercies of the weather. The door of number 6 was glossed in a tasteful mid-grey. Kate had chosen the colour and done it herself the year before. Beryl's door was much brighter, sporting scarlet paint, and had a large brass 5 by the side of it. In the summer, Beryl's huge hanging basket always provided a vibrant splash of clashing colours, but for the moment, the purple and blue shades of the more subtle winter pansies were lingering until the weather was warm enough for the new planting of the spring. The brilliant white of Beryl's double-glazed windows made a startling contrast to her door, and the whole effect was kept sparkling by the regular cleaner that Sophie and her parents clubbed together to pay for when the old lady had begun to fret about letting her standards slip. Kate suspected that the reluctance to clean was more because it took time away from Beryl's hectic social life, but who could blame her? Beryl and her friends had much more going on than Kate did, and none of them would see 80 again. Sophie was right. She really needed to take stock of her life if the local octogenarians were leading the way when it came to fun. It was still too early to cook the simple pasta dish that Kate had lined up for this evening, and she really mustn't start on the chocolate yet. Maybe she should attempt some experiments with food that took more time to get ready. At least then the rest of the evening wouldn't go on so long. As she pondered on this idea, Kate's phone buzzed with a message from Sophie. Her eyes widened as she read it. "Hey, mate, Arnie B's just told me that the Meadowthorpe Morris men are at the pub tonight. They don't usually go out much in January, but they're doing a special fundraiser. Do you fancy going over? I could murder a pint. They're a great bunch. Do you remember the last time? Kiss." It had been a while since Kate had ventured into the Fox and Fiddle, partly due to her general lack of enthusiasm for socialising these days, but also because it had been her dad's local, and being there made her miss him more than ever. Did she want to go over to the pub with Sophie? She certainly did remember the last time she and Sophie had seen the MMMs, as they were known locally. It had been a riot of laughter with too much beer, but that night was not long before her dad had died, and so the memories were bittersweet. He'd been an enthusiastic part of the group for years, whacking sticks and jingling bells with gusto. After a moment, Kate typed her answer back. "Can't face it, sorry, too soon after Dad." There was no response for at least 5 minutes, and Kate was beginning to worry that she'd offended Sophie when the next message pinged into view. "And you think he'd want you to sit at home and moulder? Get your best jeans on, eat something to line your stomach, and try and find a jumper that isn't navy. I'm calling for you at 7 on the dot. Beryl and her sidekicks are coming too. They're always good for a laugh." It was too much of an effort to say no again, and Kate sensed a flicker of something that felt almost like enthusiasm. She stashed her chocolate in the fridge, put the pasta on to boil, and went upstairs to rummage in the wardrobe drawer. An hour later, dressed in jeans and an oversized burgundy sweater that could almost have been described as jolly, Kate had finished her dinner but still had a little while to wait. She made herself comfortable on the bed and spread out the handful of photographs she'd unearthed along with the jumper. They were all from the era when Sophie had burst on the scene, fresh from Sydney after a passionate but disastrous relationship with a surfer dude called Jason. Her parents had thought a few weeks with Beryl would take their daughter's mind off her problems. Sophie initially rejected this simple solution to her woes, but to everyone's surprise, she'd fallen in love with English village life and opted to stay with her equally rebellious aunt long term. "Beryl's a naughty sister," Sophie told Kate soon after they met at the pub. "She really gets me, and she's happy if I stick around a lot longer. Hey, I've had a thought. You and me could do something together. How do you fancy catering college? There's one in the town, Beryl says. Meadowthorpe, isn't it? I love cooking. Or have you got other plans?" As it happened, Kate was drifting at the time, unsure whether to bite the bullet and head for university or to mark time and carry on aimlessly finding casual work for a while. Catering college sounded like a good halfway house. Her father was cranking up the oh-so-subtle pressure for her to stay locally. For a pragmatic medical man in his working world, Ted was the worst kind of warrior when it came to his daughter and hated the idea of Kate flying the nest. Also, Kate's mother, Caroline, had almost reached the end of her tether trying to keep tabs on Jamie, who seemed to find new trouble to get into with every week that passed. If Kate signed up for a local course, she should probably try to give her mum some much-needed backup to get her younger brother back on the rails. As it turned out, Jamie had other ideas about being sensible, and by the time Kate and Sophie's course finished, he was on the verge of sliding into even more dangerous waters. And that was where Kate's future husband entered the picture. A novice golfer himself, if Howard hadn't got involved in the nick of time through a new scheme run by the golf club to encourage teenagers to get off the streets and onto the green, Kate knew Jamie's story could have panned out very differently. At this point, everything changed for Kate, because Sophie decided to take a long break to visit her mum and dad in Australia before settling permanently in Willowbrook, and Howard made it clear that he wasn't just hanging around the Baxter home to keep an eye on his protégé. To begin with, Kate was flattered that he obviously lusted after her so desperately, but soon found a tug-of-war going on with herself right in the middle. Kate picked up one of the photographs and studied the body language. In it, she was sitting on the swinging seat in Beryl's garden on a bright summer's day, sandwiched in between Howard and Sophie. Jamie was lying on the grass at their feet, smoking something dodgy as she remembered. All of their faces were sullen. Kate remembered Beryl getting a camera out and bellowing, "Smile." Nobody complied. "Why won't you come to Sydney with me, Katie?" Sophie had wailed just before the photo was taken. "You know you want to." "Who says she wants to?" Howard snapped. "Kate's better off here. I know for a fact Ted doesn't want her to go with you." "Ah, phooey."
Sophie said. He just likes a being where he can keep tabs on them all the time. I'm sure it's not natural to be so clucky about your kids.
He ain't clucky about me, though, Jamie said. He leaves all the flapping to Mum.
I know, you're the lucky one, said Kate. It seems as if Dad's obsessed with the fear that I'll get murdered, or worse, if I go far from Willowbrook. What's worse than being murdered, then? Jamie chipped in again from the floor, and was rewarded with 3 icy glares. Just asking, he mumbled, rolling another tatty cigarette. In the end, Howard had won the argument. Of course he had. He'd played his trump card by booking a trip to Portugal for himself, Kate, and Jamie in a holiday complex right next to a golf course. Howard explained that he would coach Jamie by day while Kate saw the sights, sunbathed, and swam, and at night they'd all go out on the town and eat delicious local food. Ted approved of Kate being supervised, and Caroline sighed with relief at the thought of some respite from worrying about what Jamie might do next. When the 3 returned, Sophie had already left for her own holiday, still furious with everyone, especially Kate. She was away for several weeks, and by then Jamie had thoroughly got the golfing bug. Kate had accepted Howard's very romantic proposal of marriage, and she'd also decided to follow her original plan of applying for a university place to train as a teacher. Her ultimate aim was to have as large a family as she could manage, but there was plenty of time for both. It took a long time for Kate and Sophie's relationship to settle into its previous comfortable pattern, because Sophie had never been one of Howard's fans, but eventually they'd clawed back their equilibrium. Kate was still lost in her memories of that torrid time when she heard 3 loud raps on the front door as it was flung open, and Beryl's voice calling, come out, wherever you are. Sophie's sent me and the girls to make sure you don't back out of tonight's jolly." When Kate reached the top of the stairs, she saw 3 upturned faces, all beaming. "You look almost cheerful in that sweater, dear," Beryl said. "It's nice to see you with a bit of colour on for a change." "You can say that again," said her friend Winnie, "but showing a bit of boob wouldn't come amiss." She glanced down at her own ample cleavage, proudly on display in a clinging crimson top. "If you've got it, flaunt it, that's what I always say. It's a very high neckline you've got there." "Either legs or boobs, you need to make the most of your assets, Kate," said Beryl. "I've gone for legs tonight, but some people say you shouldn't wear tight trousers after a certain age, but these ones do wonders for my bum, I reckon." She did a twirl, and Winnie applauded. Anthea, whom Kate always thought of as the posh one, nudged the other 2 as Kate came down the stairs. "Give her some space. You're crowding the poor treasure," she said, stepping back onto Winnie's toe. As Winnie hopped up and down, swearing under her breath, Kate viewed the 3 ladies, wishing she had a pair of sunglasses handy. Nobody could ever call them...